a positional group like the tight end group. This is the draft class to do it. It is very deep.
I'm with Green Bean. I mean, to me, the tight ends that you want to have on a team, it's always nice if you can get the guy that does it all.
I think it's going to be a functional part of the offense. You better get somebody in there that can play, or get a couple guys that do something, extraordinarily well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dom C here with the Talking Jets Network. I'm lucky enough to grab tight end from Georgia Tech, Jackson Hollis. Jackson, how's it feel to be back on the field, my brother?
It's great, man. You know, right when we were getting on that bus, I was just excited.
And that's Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech. Now, he didn't say anything. He continued and did all the drills on an ankle. Another guy with under a 4% drop rate throughout his collegiate career.
Jets Network were able to get a hold of Terrence Ferguson, tight end, Oregon. Dude, great practice so far. How's it feel to be back on the field?
Oh, man, it feels good to be out here. I love competing. You know, there's a lot of great players out here, so go against
Meet our friend Harold Fannin.
See, here with the Talking Jets Network, lucky to grab Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr. Harold,
former college quarterback, he's thrown, he's got touchdown passes in his career, He matches movements and he matches, he's got quick feet. Like I said, he's another guy who's got a nose for the ball, turns the ball over all the time. Again, another smooth mover, clicks and closes.
What is going on, everybody? I am Jeremy. This is Jets Chaos, and my guest, my host, my brain, the talent for this evening, my king, my
brother from another mother,
my countryman, Dom C.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
What's going on today? I'm so excited for today because today is a position that, man, when I was a kid, I hated. Like, I didn't want to think about it. When I was a kid growing up, 10, 12, 13 years, I just cared about the wide receivers, the running backs. Back then, running backs mattered. That's all I cared about. I didn't know who the big thugs were. Just throw a couple of big fatties up there, and who cares? And now here I am 35 years later, and I'm just obsessed with the offensive line. Obsessed.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I got to say, this is my favorite positional group to really get in the weeds with. Hands down, I think they're the funnest to watch. Because offensive linemen, tackles or whatnot, but offensive linemen are involved in every single play. It's not like, Jeremy, how many times have you watched a wide receiver and you're like, all right, man, I've watched 16 straight plays and he doesn't even run around on this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's why I think I'm more in love with it ever. I think you just nailed it. It's like it's hard to watch anything else but defensive and offensive line once you start watching like that, because it's the only one where it's like every rep you get to see something.
Yep.
Like every rep, and the camera's always right there and you can really analyze it. And the other positions, man, oh my God, let's not even talk about it. Like the safety. Oh, I could just
safeties and wide receivers I find very, very monotonous. Like, I end up having to watch games twice for a guy because it's just like, all right, halfway through I'm like bored out of my skull.
Yeah.
Not bored because of, like they're not doing anything, but bored because they're not doing anything, They're just not involved or active in every play. But unlike the tackles, they're involved in every play. And I'll first say this, this year more so than any other year in the past, I don't know if there's been a lot of comparisons, right? And it doesn't matter the positional group or whatnot. There's been a lot of comparisons that say, hey, where would this guy fall in last year's class and so on. So we got to remember that it's apples and oranges. Last year's class isn't this year's class. So the values of guys, it's really hard to gauge like that. I will say, my opinion only, I think talent-wise, especially at the top, last year's class is head and shoulders above this year's tackle class.
Yeah. I know that you ruined me. You spoiled me. You sat there with me an hour about a year ago and watched Joe Alt with me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I go in And
you compare everyone to Joe Alt.
I remember that. And I'm looking for that kind of guy. I'm looking for it to be like Joe Alt. And like you just said, there's no one this year that's even close to that. There really isn't. I'm sorry. It's just not even close. That Joe Alt you can watch for so long. It was so hard to find a bad rep for the guy.
Yeah.
Like went on and on and on and on. And now with all these guys, I have to adjust now and be okay with the fact that every once in a while when you're watching them rep after rep, there's going to be bad reps.
Yeah.
It's part of football.
So again, not comparing the two classes because it's almost impossible to do it. But I had 5 tackles in the top 17 of last year's class. I have 1 tackle in the top 20 this year. Again, that's just me. But I think it shows to the level of top end talent. Now, I think that there's better guys later on in this one. You know, this class more so. I think the the strength of this, where the strength meets the value in this class, it's probably from rounds 2 to 4. So
yeah. I agree. I like most of the times whenever I'm doing the drafts, I'm doing the mock drafts. I find myself the sweet spot is always round 2. There's always a guy, and I don't want to name the names yet, but there's always one of the guys that we like. I say we now because you kind of guide me to the ones to watch, and then sometimes we have a difference of opinion, and like we talked about it, where I'm like, oh well, this guy I think should be 5, and this guy should be 6, and usually the ones we disagree on like that, you say, Jeremy, my overall rating is 0.01 difference, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you disagreeing with that. I don't think we've ever been wide apart. Not this year.
No, this year not so much. I mean, maybe I don't even know. Last year definitely more so. Well, I'll say this much: I think you might be, and this is not a bad thing. I mean, but because that's what people also need to remember is that the scouting process is so subjective. Like I said, my eyes might gravitate or see something different than yours do. You happen to be a little bit higher on Tet McMillan than I am. Not that I'm low on him. I think he's 11 in my class. It's not like he's low, but
he's one wide receiver for you. So
exactly. But yeah, so it's all subjective. Even this one, like we're going to talk about the top 8 tackles. My tackle 9 has the same exact grade as my tackle 8. So it could have been swapped. They could have been swapped out, but.
Right. And I may have been the influence of why number 8 was your number 8. I want to thank Grandizer. He's back. He's not always available, but when he is, he always comes in and he's like the gift not moderator. He just comes in and he gives out our links and helps everybody find us. So Grandizer, it's been a while, but glad you're here. Glad to have you back. Glad to see you.
Yeah, man.
And,
I agree.
What good to see Wildwave. So anyway, so let's get into it. We're going to do the top 8, which shows, if it was a class where there were a lot of offensive guys we were in love with, there would be 10, right? I mean, I think if it was a crazy, ridiculous class, there may be 12. That's how we do this show. And I think because it's not it's not a top heavy tackle draft, it gets kind of sweet in the second and third round, but then it kind of gets dry kind of quickly. That it's worth saying that's why we're only doing 8. And but you do have an honorable mention that's really close to number 9 is close to number 8.
I got 2 honorable mentions I don't want to talk about.
Okay.
All right. Sure. 2 guys that I think are deserved. The first one, it's a guy who's a little bit lower, but I think he's got a really, really I think he's got a chance to really be a player in the league. I just don't know if it's going to be right away. All right. And that's Chase Lunt out of UConn. Okay. He's my 11th rated tackle. So, he played at UConn, 5th year senior. He's 6'7", almost 6'7.5", but only 311 pounds. So he definitely needs to, eat. That dude is like a string bean. But man, he is explosive. Now, again, UConn doesn't play an SEC schedule, doesn't play a Big Ten schedule. You know, the competition is what it is. I mean, that's where he's played. But he's explosive. He's a really good mover at 6'7". You know, he can get out there. I think he's built perfectly to be an outside zone tackle, right? He can get out, he can peel off, he can wall off at the second level really good. He's phenomenal as a lead blocker in the screen game, so on and so forth. He's very active. He keeps his feet moving, always fighting his hands. It shows up in the run game as well. Like there's one thing, you know, you probably remember as a kid, Jeremy, you know, when kids playing football, all the old time coaches used to always say, like, keep your feet moving, churn your feet, you know, keep your legs moving, right? And you watch Chase Lunt do that. He's like I said, he's long, he's tall, he's long, he's got good hand usage, he's got active feet, and he's got a lot of experience, almost 50 starts under his belt.
Jeez.
Yeah, he's a little bit. He needs a good year or two to be in a weight room. That's what he needs. He just needs the lower body is just really, really thin. And it doesn't help because at 6'7", you know, and we'll talk about another 6'7" tackle very shortly. But at 6'7", he just, you know, he doesn't win a lot of the leverage battles, right? He's got tall tackle problems.
Yeah. And I know who we're going to talk about later because there is that concern about.
So, the difference is it, and why Lunt to me is like the prototypical, like development tackle. When you talk about a developmental tackle, like that's the guy you want. It's not like, hey, he might have a chance to be good, like, you know, like the Max Mitchells of the world. Lunt has been very good. You know, he just needs to get a little bit more functional strength, a little bit stronger. And I think
what round could we expect him to go?
I think he's got he graded out for me as a late third, early fourth, and I think that's probably comfortable. You know, because he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Again, I think he's going to go into a team that's predominantly outside zone or zone blocking scheme. You know, so teams like the Raiders or the Rams that run like power football, the Ravens, they're not gonna look at him. That's just not his game. You know, he's much more better. He's much more of a better player in space. So I think late round 3, early round 4 is probably where you're going to see him come off the board. Maybe late round 4, because he's a guy that's probably going to need 2 years, right? Okay. Probably a guy that's going to need 2 years. So
probably not the guy we're looking for. If we're trying to solve our starting tackle, if we're not using Chewy, and our goal is to draft our starting
Chewy, I love that.
But if our plan is not to if our plan is to draft our starting right tackle, if that's the plan, this is not the guy. This is the guy if you're a team that maybe has your 5 starters, but knows that somebody's going to leave down the road in a year or two.
Yeah.
You want to get the next guy up, start developing somebody.
Yes.
That you believe could be really good.
Like, look at sorry. You look at teams like Philadelphia and Baltimore, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They do a phenomenal job of this. Is that they'll draft a guy a year or two before they need him, right? Mm-hmm. So when they do need him, he's ready to go, and he can, you know, it's turnkey. That's what Chase Lunt is. Like he's not a guy, you know, like I said, a year, maybe 2 years of really good strength development, and I think you're gonna have a guy that can play. Is he gonna be an all-pro player? You know, I don't know. You know, maybe he could develop in there, but you know, I think the better odds are that you're getting a really good starter, right?
Okay. And who else? Honorable mention?
My other honorable mention, and it's only fair because, like I said, he graded out exactly to the T, the same as my number 8, and that's Logan Brown, out of Kansas. Logan Brown is a name that for some reason doesn't get talked about enough in this, you know, in this next tier of tackles, that second, third year of tackles, or the tier of tackles. I'm sorry. A guy, he was at the Senior Bowl. He played really well. He's got ideal size, you know, 6'6.5", 320 pounds, 35.5-inch arms. So he's got elite length. Yeah, elite traits. He was a 5-star recruit. He was the number 2 player overall in the country when he came out of school back in 2019. And it's funny, he went to Wisconsin and he redshirted, and and they found out, I guess, that I don't know how you find this out after the fact, but he had some sort of like physical problem. I don't know if it was like he became a type was it type 2 diabetic or something like that, where he had to take care of it. Yeah, he not as a child. He didn't have it as a child. I guess he grew.
Right, type 2. That's type 2.
Yeah,
when it's diet, when it's
yeah. So he redshirted as a freshman to really kind of take care of his body.
Yeah.
And then he dealt with an injury when he was at I think he transferred to Kansas and dealt with an injury, a leg injury that kept him out the whole year. So he's only been a starter for 1 year, so I think that's what people are a little kind of sketchy or concerned about. But man, you talk about elite traits, the size, the length, footwork. He plays with patience. He does a good job of initiating and not catching. And Jeremy, that's something, I know you and I have talked about. You want to get your hands on first. You don't want hands on your chest. You want to be the one that initiates that, right?
Yeah.
But he's patient. He won't lunge. Like sometimes if you're over aggressive as an offensive tackle, a defensive lineman will wait for you. Will wait for you to make your move and kind of, take a little false step and swipe and get you off balance. And that's how they beat you. But he's not. He always stays in balance. He plays with phenomenal leverage. He sinks really well. He's got tree trunks for legs, man. So the questions of him is that he's only done it for 1 year, right? I think he's only got 12 games started in his career. I don't know if he's going to be a true left tackle, because that kick slide and that setup on speed sometimes is really, really tough for him to get. He might be more so a right tackle. He might even move into guard. He probably could be a really, really dominant guard. But getting into that is some of the stuff that comes across his face to the inside. Gave him some fits in college. So Logan Brown, I think, is a guy, probably not a plug and play start, not a draft and start kind of player, but somebody who is going to be like an offensive line coach's like wet dream, man. You look at him and he looks like a football player, and he plays like a football player. He needs a little bit more reps. He needs a little bit more fine tuning, and that's what good coaching will land. He lands in a place like Philly with Jeff Stoutland over there as the offensive line coach. He lands in New England, who they got a new offensive line coach there too, who's really good. And I think you're going to get a really good starter soon enough. So that's Logan Brown.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I want to thank Dano. He says, Jeremy, this is because ball and you ain't got no haters. You ain't.
What?
And if you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping, baby.
That's Robert Saleh's line.
I definitely have some haters. I don't know if he's talking about ACs. There are some haters, man. I got to learn how to deal with those haters. I need a lesson from you, Dom. You're much better at dealing with the haters than me. I get all into it. You probably just ignore them.
Yeah, I ignore them.
I got to get better at that, and just ignore them. Every time I do the show at Matt, on Talking Jets, I told myself not to do it, and I looked at the comments, and I got into it with somebody already because they're just haters. There's nothing you could do about it. But Danger, thanks for the super chat. Love you, bro. Thank you. Appreciate it. And we are up to the fun part. I say the fun part because we're in the top 8. We're going to announce our top 8. And I gotta say, this guy, I was a little taken aback. I kind of thought that he should be a little bit higher for my taste. But when I look at the guys ahead of him, the only ones that I would argue are the ones I haven't really watched a lot of film on. And one thing you taught me is don't criticize somebody's take if you haven't watched the other guy's film. So I watched the film. I need to keep my mouth shut. But anyway, I'll let you announce number 8.
Yeah.
And everybody knows him because they know I love him. I love number 8. Let's find out how much you like.
And I will say this. All the including Logan Brown. So my top 9 guys all have a solid, full third round grade or better.
Right. Okay.
And then numbers 5 through 9, they're all in the same tier. Like some might have like a second to third grade, some have a solid third, but they're really interchangeable. This is just how my likings is, and that's number 8 is Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College. Seems to be everyone's go-to darling when they're doing mock drafts and they don't take a tackle early. They they'll just end up taking Ozzie Trapilo later. So that's fine. Again, similar to hey Bon Jovi, what's up, man? Similar to what we talked about with Chase Lunt, right? 6'7". He's 310 pounds, again, a little bit light, but he's built a little bit differently than Chase Lunt. Chase Lunt looks like a string bean. Ozzie Trapilo doesn't.
Well, that was why somebody said, "Are you worried about his height at right tackle?" I think when I was on Talking Jets on the reality check, and I said, when we watched him at the Senior Bowl, I didn't get that feel of clumsy tall. Mm-hmm. He looked really proportioned, and when you watch his film, he what I love about. You tell me if I'm wrong. I know the way I saw it, because there was the difference in the way there's different styles. Like his style to me was more. I noticed the hands more than anything, almost like a boxer. Like he really knows how to use his hands, and he just beats the shit out of the defender. So that was my take on him, and I wasn't worried about his height and that. So I'm glad it feels like that's what you're saying, that we shouldn't worry about his height.
Well, I mean, listen, you got to worry about his height because he's 6'7", and he's going to lose leverage to defensive tackles and defensive ends that are smaller than him, especially the ones who stay low and fire low. It's just hard for him to get his pad level down. He's got to match his pad level to really do it. The difference between the build of Ozzie Trapilo and Chase Lunt, who we also said is that tall tackle, the difference is the functional strength. Ozzie Trapilo has it, right? He's, he again, similar to Lunt, for a big guy, he moves very well, right? He's quick. He's got a good first step. He's got very, very fast and fluid feet. He bends well. He's not a waist bender. He bends knees. He's got good ankle flexion. All the stuff that you want to see in a tackle. The movement skills are really good for a guy that big. He's really light on his feet, whether he's going vertically or he's, moving horizontally. Again, I think he's a great guy for an outside zone. I really, really think that. I think that, and I don't think he's only in that, but he shouldn't move the way he does, when he's, when he's out in space or, peeling off at the second level, so on and so forth. The difference between him and Lunt is the play strength. Man, he's got a really, really good, solid base. He's strong hipped. He's got a really good anchor. He re-anchors very well. If he loses that leverage battle and starts to backtrack a little bit, he can re-anchor very well. And he's power. He plays with a lot more pure power. So when he's down blocking and stuff, he can move defensive linemen. He doesn't just have to wall off or use his leverage. He can actually displace defensive linemen, which is really good. And he plays nasty, man. There's something about tackles that play through the whistle that just or linemen that play through the whistle. And every lineman that I've really hung my hat on in the past few years has been those guys, right? J.C. Latham, Miles Frazier. A couple years back, oh my God, what was his name? I can't remember anyway. Zach Frazier last year. Who was the tackle that I loved out of Tulsa coming out? He plays for Dallas now. I can't think of his name. Anyway, Guyton? No, not Guyton. Not Guyton. A couple years ago. He was so he plays through the whistle and you love it. Again, where does he struggle? He's not as patient as Logan Brown, right? So he'll try to, he's physical and he's fast. He's got a good first step, but sometimes he gets, a little bit off balance because he lunges, right? He'll try to get hands on you and he's not patient. So I think that, balance is really important. Again, the pad level thing is real. You know, he played left tackle last year. I don't know how much right tackle. Let me see here, actually, while I got my stats up. I'm sorry, he paid. Let me see. Bada boom. No, he played 762 snaps at right tackle. I apologize. He was left tackle the year before. 11 pressures in almost 400 pass block snaps. No sacks let up. Only 3 penalties. So, you know, really, really, really fluid, really well-rounded. A guy that I think is probably a third-round player. Probably a guy that, speaking for the Jets, that you come in, if you take him, you say, hey, a core 4, Ozzie, you guys are going to battle it out, you know, and have at it in camp.
Yeah. So he has a chance to be a day one starter, but he's not going to be handed the job.
I think he's not like it's not a no-brainer with him. That's what I'll say. You know, and I'd probably say that with all these guys outside of maybe the top 3. I think if you draft in the top 3, you're drafting them to be your guy. Outside of that, I think it's it's competition.
Yeah. Hey guys, I see there's a lot of questions in the chat, like about other players. Same for the end. Let's go. Yeah. We're going to go through the list. We're going to talk about the top 8, and then at the end, we'll always say, so remember these questions, cut and paste them, whatever. Just go back and get them later if I can't scroll and find them. But we will answer these questions about these other players and things like that after we go through our list. So being that, I'll just say one more time. Obviously, I'm a huge Ozzie Trapilo fan. We spoke to him at the Senior Bowl. It is a little bit biased when you see them close up, you know, and he had that kind of look, that star of, I felt like I was standing next to an NFL player, and I kind of got like, you know, starstruck by him. He's a big man. He was big. Like when I walked up to him, I was like, wow, this guy is a huge dude. Yeah. I just hope he doesn't end up in New England. The New England media was all over him that week.
Yeah, well, he grew up there. I think he's from Connecticut. He grew up a Patriots fan. Yeah. I think his dad actually even played for the Patriots like years and years ago. So
that brings us to number 7. I want to say what I love. Number 7, I didn't get to watch his film, but I'll tell you this.
Okay.
I'm there by the school all the time. My family's down there. My brother went there. They have a history of putting out good offensive linemen, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. They've had good running backs, good linemen. They even had a really good quarterback who was in the league for a long time, who might be in the Hall of Fame someday, possibly. I think it's a debatable argument. And that this player is from NC State, and I'll let you say more about him.
Yeah, Anthony Belton from NC State is my number 7 tackle. Big son of a bitch. 6'6", 336.
Wow.
Yeah, just built like an offensive lineman. He looks a lot shorter and a lot stockier just because he's a big guy. And you know, you talk about Green Bean. What's the first thing Green Bean looks at in offensive linemen? Right?
Like big fatties.
Legs and ass, right? And that's Belton. That's Belton. He's got like pillars for legs. I mean, this guy is like freaky strong. Freaky strength. In like when you talk about power profiles, when you talk about dominating road grading type of tackles, that's this guy. He plays that way. He's strong as an ox from the ground up. His hands are violent. He displaces defensive linemen with ease. He runs through them. He hits hard. His hands, his punch stop defensive linemen in their tracks, literally. Defenders have a hard time. He can redirect them. He can place, like, make defensive edge rushers go exactly where he wants to go. I think he's got really good grip strength too. Once he latches on, forget it. The game's over. And for a guy that big, also, he fires out of his stance. His first step is just really, really fast. He shouldn't move that fast. Combo blocks or duo blocks are he's phenomenal at them, because he'll chip down and knock a guy over a full gap before peeling off to the second level and leveling out a linebacker or a safety that's up in his face. He never stops moving. He plays with a really, really, like revved up high motor. I love that in him. He just needs to clean up some stuff technically, right? Too many times where he's, over aggressive, and he'll flat out whiff on blocks at times. I mean, his tape is, he has some of those. His hands are violent, but technically not sound. He comes in a little wide and lets guys get into his chest a little too much. That's what I don't, that's something that is like a real no-no in college. At the tackle position, I should say. Speed hurt him a little bit last year, and so did penalties. I think he had 21 pressures and 8 penalties. Some might say he might be better in as a guard, but you can say that with a lot of these tackles. Outside of maybe, I think personally, Josh Connerly, Josh Simmons, and Ozzie Trapillo. I think you can have the argument that they might be, some will say they're guards, some will say they're tackles. I think those are 3 of the guys that are true tackles in their eyes, in my eyes, I should say. So, but man, Belton, what he can do in an offense where you want to really, enforce your will and establish a running game, he's perfect fit for it. And I think,
and that's what we're trying to do. I think,
yeah. I think Belton's really, really good. I think he might be, probably him and Membo might be the 2 best run blockers in this class.
If we grab Belton in the second round, is that way too high, or would you be okay with
I don't think it's too high. I don't. I don't think it's too high. I think you might be, I don't think you have to go to round 2, but you might not be able to get him where you are in round 3. So maybe it's one of those things. And I really think that Muji's going to try to move up and down the board. I don't think he'll do it in the first round, but I could see him moving back in the second and acquiring some more capital. So if you move back from 42 to say 52, something like that, and you wanted to land a guy like that, that's fine. Or if you wanted to trade up from 70, whatever we're at, the 3rd round pick, and you wanted to move up to 65 or 60 or something like that, then I could totally see it. Like for me, Belton's not going to be, again, he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, because he's not as technically sound of a tackle. And again, some people might see his power profile and say he's a guard, so he might end up dropping to the 3rd round. But I would be completely comfortable with him anywhere in that round 2, round 3 area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, and if they couldn't find a partner, if they took him at 42, we feel a little weary about it, not the best value possibly. But if he won the starting job and had a really decent rookie year, and then for the next bunch of years, for the next 8 years or whatever it is, he's our right tackle and he's really good and makes a couple of Pro Bowls, you'll never cry or worry or be upset that we used the 42 on him. So
and listen, I know this is not going to be a good comparison for Jets fans, but his game coming out of North Carolina State reminds me a lot of what Mekhi Becton was coming out of Louisville. Like, just dominant as a run blocker, just absolutely dominant, good enough as a pass with some quirks or with some tendencies that he had to get, that have to get fixed. But yeah, I see a lot of Mekhi Becton in his game.
And hey, if you don't have the weight issues and you don't have somebody roll on your leg, that's not, like, I want people to remember that's not a bad thing. Especially because you're not picking him at 11. We're talking about 2nd round, trading back or trading up a little with our 3rd round pick. We're projecting him to be a little higher than, like, 73, 72 is too late. 42 is a little too early. We're looking at 52 to 55 range, right? If we wanted to nail the value. Okay, I love it. Number 6. Okay, this is a guy I really like. I thought you were higher on him because
in the fall, he was my number 1 tackle. Okay. Mm-hmm. As I went back and I re-evaled, and really more so as I got into some of these other guys, because he was one of the first tackles that I graded out. It's not so much that I don't like him. Okay, I'll preface by saying it's that I like some of these other guys a little bit more. Like, and I'm talking about Ariante Ursary from Minnesota here. He's my 57th player overall, right? So I mean, he's got a
that's a second round solid.
Yeah, he's got a solid second round pick. Okay, he's got a solid second round grade from me. Again, another guy. I should have included him in the list with Belton and Membo in terms of like really, really good, nasty run blocker. A guy, strong grip, great latch. Takes defenders for a ride. Had more pancakes this year than anybody outside of JC Latham probably that I've scouted in the past couple years, which is just. His ability to just torque and use his sheer power to just turn guys and just lay them flat. Again, another guy who has really good length, 34-inch arms, really good upper body strength. Was a national shot put champion in high school. How does that translate into the NFL? I don't know, but that when you're shot put, how much strength you have to get that thing out. So you can just tell that the upper body strength is there. Huge arms. When he gets his hands on you, it's all over. Really good foot speed as well. To go along with the play strength. Freaky athlete for a guy who's 6'6", 330. He's big. He's just so it's hard for guys to get around him. To get around him that big, somebody that big and that long, is really, really difficult for guys to get around. Where I think he struggles is he's just a little stiff, right? Mm-hmm. And that stiffness really, really shows. He plays a little bit tall, and I think that's just because of his lack of hip flexibility and lower and hamstring flexibility that he just. He relies way too much on his upper body strength to win, and that's just not going to always cut it in the NFL, right?
Right.
It's just not going to always cut it. He has a tendency on his pass sets too to overset. He gets beat too much to the inside. A little soft on the inside hand. I think that's technical stuff that can get worked out. I think he can play left or right tackle. I even think you can put him in a guard in a pinch. Not in a pinch, but I think he could be a guard as well. But I think, he's got the size and he's got the length to really handle tackle at the next level. So I think that's where Ursary falls. I think if the Jets want him, you're going to have to use a second round pick on him. I don't think he'll reach the 70s. So I think that, you have to be solid. You have to be sold that this is your guy and you go get him if you want him in round 2.
Right. So round 2 guy, it's always nice when they have the backup of guard, they could be a guard if for some reason they're just not cutting it, Interesting that he has that problem on the inside because you think you think that he wouldn't have to cheat, or wouldn't feel that, you think that he would be able to, like you always tell me, line up with the right tackle, left shoulder pad to protect the inside and trust his arm length for the outside.
Correct.
So, but for some reason, he's just
when you watch him on film, Jeremy, you know what it is, and like I said, for a big guy, he moves very well. So I think that probably, and this is probably ingrained in him when he was younger, maybe when he first started playing football or when he started playing, Division I football, he struggled to with the speed rushes outside, and I bet you it has a lot to do with some of that limited flexibility that he has in his lower half, that he doesn't hit his mark. He overshoots his marks on his pass sets.
Right.
So, if a guy's going outside and then stops and cuts across his face, when you tie him oversetting up with having a little bit of a passive inside hand, you're asking for trouble. So he's thinking too much about not getting beat outside and not paying attention to the counter on the inside.
Right. So there's some coaching there.
Correct.
Coaching there. But again, comes in, competes to be the starter with who we have. Would definitely have a chance to be a day one starter if we drafted him, right?
Yep. I definitely think he's in the conversation for sure.
Okay, so that's an interesting pick. Now that's what we're up to now. Now we're starting to hit, like, we're certainly in that level. We're in the level of, we draft a guy now. These guys, I mean, we're not at the point where it's automatic, but we're at the point where we're hoping they have a great camp because they have a real legitimate chance to start at this point. That's what we're hoping. And whether that, if they're not, maybe be a little concerned unless Chewy just played really, really well. Chewy. I'm hopeful that we have the kind of coaching staff that just plays the best guy. I don't want no more of this garbage about, well, he's young, let the veteran play. No. I want it completely open. The player who plays the best wins. I don't care if they're a rookie. As a matter of fact, good. Let's get him some reps and let's get him some experience in 25. So in the future, he has more under his belt, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So let's look at, let's go to number 5. This guy's exciting for me because he's, again, a guy that doesn't play too far from me. And when I say that, it's a simple 45-minute Southwest flight.
Yeah. So this is one that I think people are going to question because I think a lot. We talked about the guys that can play inside or outside, and I will preface. I will shoot this early. I don't have Will Campbell on this grade. He's not he's not graded out as a tackle for me. And it doesn't have to do just with his arm length that happened over the past couple weeks. I've said it since as long as I've been watching him this year. I think his game is a guard. So I have him graded with my guards. When we talk about the guards, we'll talk about Will Campbell.
I'm not saying I knew this, Don, but one of my proudest things, right? As I've learned from you how to do this, is I didn't say guard. That was not my thinking at the time. And I remember when I first asked you about it or told you, something's wrong on your list. I can't find Will Campbell. What happened was I watched his film against Ole Miss. I watched that game. And I didn't identify to the level you did. Oh, he's a guard. That's the issue. I'm not there yet. Mm-hmm. But what I noted was, how is this guy a top 10 player? How are people saying he could go in the top 5? Am I living in the twilight zone? Because literally in the first quarter of that Ole Miss game, I mean, with Joe Alt, it took over a game for me to find blatantly bad reps. This guy had so many bad reps in the first half of that Ole Miss game. Yeah. Like, it was like there were blatant problems where I was like, oh my God, I can't get past this. And then you basically summed it up when I said to you, because I looked, where do you have him? I go, where does Dom even have this guy? And then I was like, he's not even here. And you were like, and it made me feel so good about my scouting because you said, I don't even have him as a tackle, which I think is hysterical. But anyway, we'll talk about that more later. Let's go.
But this guy's another guy. This player is another guy that I think the majority of people will have him, graded out or set with the interiors. I think per se, I think he can play outside. He's got the length, he's got the size, 6'4.5", 333 pounds, long arms, and that's Jonah Savanea from Arizona. He started as a freshman at right guard. He started as a sophomore. For the beginning of the season, first quarter of the season, he was right guard before he moved to tackle. And then he played tackle all last year. Very young, won't even be 21 until June. So the best of this kid is yet to come. Yeah. But he's built like a house, man. He's just a massive, massive human being. Moves well, plays strong, quick feet, strong base, really good grip strength. Really active in his hands, and like I said, the alignment versatility really helps. He can play. I think he can play both guards. Probably only at right tackle. You put him at left tackle in a pinch, but I don't know. I think I think he's better off probably staying on the right side. Really good awareness. Like, you watch him, he plays, one thing I'll always compliment offensive linemen is when they play with their head on a swivel, right? You want them looking and being aware. So he's got really good awareness, really good football IQ, plays with his head on a swivel. The thing that gets me is that for a guy that big, he just lacks a little pop. Like, he doesn't have that nastiness. Much more of a technician. He does a little too much catching as opposed to receiving. And sometimes, and when you tie in, when you tie in someone who comes off the line passively, when I talk about catching, like, his first step isn't really aggressive to get his hands on the chest. His first step is, let me get in my base and try to counter what the edge rusher is going to do. And sometimes with a good power rusher, they'll just get their hands into your chest and go right through the middle of you, So that's what I got in Savaiinaea. Again, 16 pressures and 540 pass block snaps, which isn't terrible. But I just seems like for somebody that big and that long, you want him to be a little bit more aggressive. And, he had an injury when he was young. Now, I read about this. This is something that I've learned. It wasn't something where I don't know if it was he had surgery to repair, like, what's it called? Like a club foot or something like that. There's something wrong where he actually had surgery, wore a brace as a kid, so on and so forth. So you can actually see it in his left foot. It just moves a little bit weird. It looks a little bit awkward. And I think that's probably why he'll settle in on the right side. And my guess is because he has trouble on that left side. So he looks a little bit more comfortable, kind of on the right side, kind of playing the way he plays. You just wish that he has a little bit more aggressiveness and pop coming off of the line. But man, he checks all the boxes off in terms of height, weight, speed, movement skills, ability, super, super high ceiling. I think the best football is yet to come. I mean, he's really, really young. So, that's it. I mean, that's it. I think that there's a lot of teams that are going to see him as a guard. And I know that Savaiinaea actually came in with he came in an interview recently and said, like, if he had his choice, he likes, he likes the inside game. He likes the phone booth game. He would rather prefer to play guard, but he's tackle all day long. He's built long. He's built big. I think that you play him at tackle, and at worst, if he can't hang there, you can always move him inside and he'll be successful.
It's always nice to have the insurance policy of you can move him on the inside, especially when it's not number 7, right? If it's not your first round pick, like somebody said to me, well, Will Campbell, if he doesn't work out, you move him to guard. Yeah, but we used the number 7 pick, and I'm not using the number 7 pick on a freaking guard.
Yeah.
But if you use the number 2 pick and it doesn't work out, and then he becomes a Pro Bowl guard or a very good, better than average guard at second round, very good guard for years, fine. It worked, right? So yeah, it's a nice insurance policy when you think of that they can move to guard. I know we said questions at the end, but we got a $20 super chat.
Yeah,
so
sure.
We have to honor this. Brian, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. This is a question for you, Dom C. You've raved about players like Miles Frazier, Darius Alexander, guys I love too, yet they seem to rank lower than you described. Why are some players so overrated and some overhyped? Love to hear both of your feedback. I'll let you start and I'll give my opinion.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, again, the scouting process is very subjective, right? And I'm not talking about the guys like, I'm not talking about like the real big dogs in this game, the Trevor Sickamas and the Connor Rogers and, the Mel Kipers and that realm. Like, they, will formulate their own opinion. Dane Brugler, they'll do the work and they'll formulate their own opinion. But the more common or the more casual draft fans and scouts, I think, will usually just hop along on the train of what's being said. I mean, a lot of it is what a lot of people, and I think it kind of does the process a little bit of an injustice, is that they'll formulate opinions off of other people's opinions, right? And that skews a lot of things. So I think that's why some guys go overhyped. and not and underrated, if you will. And listen, Miles Frazier and Darius Alexander are two of my absolute favorites, and I'm definitely higher on them than the majority. But there's faults to their games as well. Darius Alexander's old. He's already 24. He's gonna be 25 as a rookie. I get that. Miles Frazier is not going to be a fit for everyone's offense. Right.
It's not going to be outside zone.
Yeah, his skill set is very one note, is very power gap based. But I think that that a lot of what they do and the good outweighs the bad. Like both of those guys. Well, I shouldn't say really about Alexander, but Miles Frazier is not a guy who's going to be a 9.5 RAS score and stuff like that. He's more like an old school lunch pail. I'm going to line up and I'm going to kick your ass kind of offensive lineman. And those kind of guys who are kind of one note. And you watch it last year, Jeremy, who was the center from Oregon that everyone loved? I can't think of his name right now.
The center from Oregon.
JPJ.
JPJ, yeah.
JPJ, right? He was arguably one of the best interior offensive linemen that I've ever graded out of college. He had the highest score of any interior offensive lineman that I've ever graded. And he went in the second round. Why? All right. Yeah, he battled a little bit of an ankle injury in the end of last year. That might have hurt his stock. But more so, it's, because he was one note, right? They knew that his game wasn't wasn't going to bode well in movement. He had to be more of a gap blocker. And that limits the amounts of teams that will have him high or have him ranked on his board. So I think fit and scheme plays a lot into it. And I don't know if it should. It doesn't for me. I don't necessarily rank a guy higher or lower based on his scheme fit for the Jets or for any team. I just go based on the player. So, so I hope that answers, somewhat of your question.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it flat out. Like in my opinion, this is my opinion. I have no evidence of this. This is no evidence. This is life experience. We automatically tend to assume that people in other fields, like we give them this power of authority of they do their jobs, right? What I've noticed in my life is most people are lazy. And a lot of people don't do their jobs, especially when there are workarounds. Most people, when there's a workaround, they take the workarounds. And I think that when you're a scout, there's a lot of temptation. Also, I want to qualify something else. Fear of losing your job, doing what's safe, right? So if I'm a scout and the Jets hire me to look at offensive linemen, how am I not tempted to look at every magazine? That's what it used to be. Every website, Draft Buzz, see these guys listed. And the temptation to just take those guys, read about them, look at some highlights and say, oh, yeah, I'm on board with that. Versus what Dom C does, which is take a bunch of guys, go through all these guys and really watch and try. I'm not even saying we're 100% successful, but try to rule out what everybody else is saying and make our own judgment. Now, I think that it's easy that if people get hyped up about a player right away, a lot of people jump on the bandwagon and they don't want to accept the bad things, the negatives, or the questions when other people have questions. I think a lot of people are afraid to speak up. This is all my theory. I just don't believe, because in my experience, the outlier is the person who works hard in any field. Like teaching, when I was a teacher, there were a handful of teachers out of the whole school that really worked, that didn't just take the easy lesson plan, that really fought hard to have the perfect classroom, that spent the extra 2 hours you know what I mean? And when you put that into and same thing when I worked in technology, it was like sales guys just wait for leads from their inside sales team. Then there were the best, and those were the guys that hunted and found their own deals and called into companies. And I just feel like, why would just anyone believe it would be any different in the world of scouting and personnel? When there's all this material and information out there to steal, I think that a few names, even I'm not putting him down. I love him to death. This guy, I learned a lot from this guy. He's one of the best. Frankie defends Will Campbell based on what three other guys. He said these three experts said that Will Campbell's the best tackle, and I trust those three guys. He said it himself. He's trusting these three guys. But who are these three guys trusting? Did they watch the film? Do you know they're watching the film? So that's the way I explain this. And I think that, Dom, I'm just going to say it about you, because anybody, you could always say, are they talking out of their ass or they're not talking about us? You earned your stripes, I think, by anybody who's been paying attention for the last few years. So you've earned that respect, that people trust you and they trust that you're really watching film, because we've seen players. I'm not going to start listing the players, but we've seen a bunch of players, specifically on the defensive and offensive line, that you've called out, that sometimes went up the boards after you've called it out, where you've done it first, and then we see them rise up the boards like after the Senior Bowl or after the combines. And we've seen you guys stick to guys and fight for guys that were second, third round guys. We saw Zach Frazier is one, right? Where he did end up going in the mid rounds, and you fucking nailed it. And the question was, why didn't everybody else see it? Because as soon as you pointed it out, I saw it, and I was screaming every mock draft, Zach Frazier. So the only explanation is that there's just people not doing their homework. They're not really watching. It's just this domino effect of everybody's watching what everybody else is saying. And that's my theory about it. And I also think that people are afraid of getting fired. I think that it's easier and feels safer to pick what you think everybody else is saying is true.
Yeah.
And what I love this year is you called me before the Senior Bowl about Miles Frazier, and you admitted it. You said, I feel uncomfortable doing this because no one has this guy as anything. And yet I can't stop thinking he's a top 50 player, like I'm watching the film.
Yeah.
And then we watched it together. And it was like, how do we argue with what we're watching? And then he comes into the Senior Bowl and he's the best offensive lineman all week.
Yeah.
And he's still not ranked high because people are that stubborn and locked into their stereotype. I don't know, their bias that's already been created that Miles Frazier is not a top 5 guard. So therefore, I don't care what I see. He's just not, because that's what everybody says he's not, instead of just watching the film.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to Miles Frazier being either a very solid average guard to a Pro Bowl guard in the league, because because then that'll just be more evidence of what I'm saying is true, that it's just about watching the film.
Yeah. And sometimes you get guys that, like for instance, Frazier and Alexander, I just happen to watch a lot and I watch them early. So, if you watch them early enough, it's not that I knew it. I'm not saying like that, but not like I knew something on Miles Frazier. Everyone does. I just happened to get to him probably earlier than a lot of these guys, than a lot of other people did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And listen, there's guys that I absolutely loved that never worked out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and that was my other thing that I wanted to point out to Brian. To be fair, sometimes we're just wrong. So the explanation is we're just wrong, because if anybody was 100% right, they'd be working in the NFL. Like somehow it would get, like, eventually, Dom, if you keep nailing it, it's going to somehow get to somebody. If Play Like a Jet starts nailing it, or Joe Blewett starts nailing it, where you're just right about over and over again, being that it's on film, that it's on video, that it's dated. Don't be surprised if somehow you were to get discovered or like called by somebody. It's not impossible, because I'm sorry, but I think if you were right enough, I think somebody would take notice. But you know what? We're early in the game, so let's see. Let's find out. Let's find out if somebody's smart enough to go comb through the YouTube guys that do these predictions and say, you know what, this guy always seems to be right, so we should hire him. But thank you for the super chat.
Yeah, man.
Super appreciate it. We're up to number 4 now.
Yeah, we'll go to number 4. And number 4 is here for a reason for me. I think if he was healthy, he might, and was able to get through the entire season, we might be having a different conversation about him. And that's Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. There's a lot of people that I trust implicitly in this scouting game who say hands down that Simmons is the best tackle in the class. He tore his patella tendon. He didn't just tear an ACL or an MCL or anything like that. He literally tore his patella tendon, and that has been that's not the easiest injury to come back from, right? So I think that has a lot to the fact that we don't know. I don't know what a full season of a full season of rehab, not even a full season because he did a week 5. You don't know what kind of player he's going to be when he gets back. It's not something that you can project out to say, all right, well, an ACL, usually by about 12 to 15 months, they're back to 100. This is a torn patella tendon. This is completely different. But I will say, he started after a redshirt year at San Diego State. He started 13 games as a sophomore at San Diego State at right tackle, transferred to Ohio State, started 13 games at left tackle, and started the first 5 before he got hurt here. Ohio State puts out premier NFL caliber offensive lineman, and he's definitely would have been one of the next, if not for that knee injury. Now, I'm hoping he comes back from the injury, and I'm hoping that this is one that I'm completely wrong in, and maybe I should have had him ranked as my number 1 tackle. There are some problems with his games. Again, not stuff that's insurmountable, but again, low and wide hands on a tackle for me is something that is just a no-no. So could it be coached out? Yeah. But once you're low and you're high, you let defenders get into your chest. It never really works out. Josh Simmons is probably a better football player than 75% of the defensive linemen he lined up against throughout his years in college, so he can get away with it. But you're just not going to get away with it in the NFL. So there's that. There's also the penalties. This guy was a walking penalty, which is the problem. Like that stuff that's gotta be cleaned up. And it's not just a certain type of penalty, right? It's timing, whether he jumps early, whether he's too late and he's completely beat and he's got to reach out and grab. So, there's that timing thing that he's got to, kind of get away. Those low hands that he plays with can also get very grabby. In 2023, he had 25 penalties called on him. That's just too much.
That's too many.
Yeah, that's just too many. I'm curious to see, even with the help before he tore his patella tendon, I don't think he moved out in space very well. But man, he is powerful. Nasty in a phone booth with a guy on his head, like he's blocking one-on-one or he's down blocking. He washes defenders completely out. So power, length, strength, those are his fortes. I think Josh Simmons can stay at tackle. He's done it at the left side at a high level. He's done it at the right side at a high level. To me, this would be the ultimate dart throw if he were to somehow land on the board still at 42. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't. But, maybe his knee injury, tries to scare some people off. But this is a guy who's he's got some cleaning up. He's got some cleaning up technically to get done. But man, he's got a real Pro Bowl ceiling if he can clean up those little mistakes, which I think good coaching will do, and show that he's back from the injury. I think that you're looking at a really good NFL tackle.
Wow. And it's what's exciting about him is obviously he's been in big games. He's went against the top players, he's played in big games against big edges, guys who are going to be in the draft and get drafted and be NFL players. So but he's got to clean up those penalties. I don't want to give spoilers for the future. There's another guy coming at number 2, I think, in your rankings that I wanted to talk about. That I had some concerns.
Yeah.
Also, even as high as number 2, you're going to hear Dom talk about the negatives too and the potential concerns and places where there needs to be improvement, because it reminds me with different kind of penalties, but same kind of thing what you're talking about, but about grabbing and being too far on the outside and not being in the right position.
Listen, every prospect has pluses and minuses.
Right.
I thought Latham and Alt, the pluses so far outweighed the minuses, but that's that those are just outliers. Like I said, everything in this class really comes down to the middle. And before we get into 2, we'll talk about 3.
Right. And and it goes back to what we were saying earlier in the show for those who are paying attention. I'm sorry, it was number 3 that I was talking about, who grabs too far.
Yeah, that's right.
Just to make it clear, that's what we were talking about earlier in the show, in case you joined us, is that we're going to have the most feedback about the defensive offensive line because you see more of it. There's so many more reps where every rep you could evaluate. So there's no possible way to win every rep. So you're going to be able to take out concerns or things that need to be worked on, because it's almost impossible to play an entire football game, an offensive or defensive line, and you're not going to win every rep. So anytime you lose a rep, we're going to look at and try to analyze and find out what went wrong. The next guy coming up, I just want to say I'm looking forward to hearing the pros more, because I'm concerned about the holding penalties, the hands being too far apart. And I want to know why he's still number 3 with you. Why is he so good in your minds that we should still be super, super excited about him? And that's not me downing it. I'd be happy.
Yeah.
Love it if we drafted this guy in the 2nd round. I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, well, he won't be in there in the 2nd round. This is Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. He was your Outland Trophy winner, best lineman in the country last year. Really, really compact, 6'4" and change, 320 pounds, compact, packs a serious punch with his hands. He fires off the ball well. He plays with bad intentions, which is something that you really like. Like, he's always looking to put somebody on his back, right? Those strikes are powerful. He'll move his feet through contact. He goes through. We talk about displacement a lot, and he'll go through guys not only into their hip horizontally on a down block, but even through their chest. Like, he'll push guys 5-6 yards right off the line of scrimmage.
His run blocking off the line of scrimmage, there's nothing to be concerned about that, right?
No, it's really good. He understands leverage. Like I said, he's a little bit shorter, so he doesn't struggle with getting the low pad level. Like, he's got natural low pad level, which is really good. But on top of that, he sinks very well, and he's got really strong hips. You combine that with a really, really good upper body strength. And that's just that's like the Hulk running through a wall. That's what you get. He moves good. Really, really light on his feet. Again, moves good both vertically and horizontally. He does good as a puller, as a kick out block. We talked about IQ. This guy's got it. Plays with his head on a swivel. Super, super aware, never gets bothered with the games up front, the stunts and the loops and all that stuff. He knows how and does a good job with spatial awareness, when to pass off defenders to the inside or to the outside, so on and so forth. You talked about it though, Jeremy. 16 holding penalties over the past 2 years, right? He grabs, right?
And why? Hands are too, right? Because you always told me you want to get him on the inside.
You're absolutely right. You know why? You know why you want your hands on the inside? Not only do you keep guys off your chest, but it's hard to see when you're holding.
Yeah.
It's hard to see when you're holding when
your hands are out here and they do any spin either way. It's like the ref can see you holding.
Yeah. So, and for a guy that, listen, he just grabs, man. That's just what it is. Like, that sometimes is just bad habits. I think that again, really, he's got to really work at that. And sometimes he gets a little bit, like, I don't like the work. He does phenomenal work in a phone booth at the point of attack, but some of the stuff for a guy who's moves as good as he does, the second level stuff, he'll overextend, he'll whiff, he'll overshoot, miss his marks. He'll get guys that shed him really quick because he's off balance at that second level.
Because he's lunging too soon.
Yeah. But, the good thing is you don't see it a lot in his pass protection. But you see it, when he's, trying to, reach, do those reach blocks to the linebackers or the safeties at the second level, so on and so forth. So, the athletic ability for Kelvin Banks is going to make him probably at worst, top 20 pick.
Wow.
I think he's going to be off the board a lot sooner than that. I like him a lot to the Dolphins. I think he's a perfect fit. I think he can play inside or outside. He could start inside for the Dolphins and then kick outside. Maybe if you want to put him on the right side after Austin Jackson contract's done, or if you want to start him out as a left tackle, I think he can do it. He's going to come. You got to understand that you're going to take some lumps, and you're probably going to get a lot of penalties from him early start, and hopefully that he learns. He learns from that stuff. Again, just like all these guys. Another really young player, will be 21 at the time of the draft. So a lot of really, really good play has yet to be is coming down the pike. I don't think he's reached his peak talent yet. He needs a good coach. He needs a good offensive line coach. But I think he can be a really good player.
Yeah, I could totally see Miami. I think Miami is definitely. I would
in the market, yeah.
I mean, they're 80% chance. I mean, if not higher, to take a freaking offensive lineman tackle in this draft. And the only other thing I can imagine is they take a safety to replace the guy they lost. But I don't even see how could you prioritize that. I mean, they got an offensive-minded head coach. They're going tackle, and you're right. This guy, I could totally see him falling right into Miami's laps.
Yep.
Yeah.
So number 2, much to the chagrin of Jets fans, my number two tackle on the board is Armand Membou.
And people will call that controversial. People will be upset, and it's silly because he's your number 2, and because just because somebody
he's my number 2, and he's my number 20 player overall.
Right, and people have to understand that when you're evaluating players and watching film the way you do and watching the film on the number of players you watch film on, to have somebody as your number 20, to have them as your number 2 tackle on the entire board is not an insult just because it's not as high as some other people.
Yeah. To Grandizer point, real quick, I'm going to pop that last comment on the stream before I get into Membou. I absolutely think Banks can come in and start right away at left tackle. I actually think he's a better prospect than Patrick Paul coming out of college. So I think that, and I get it. Like, they might want to, I wouldn't say necessarily that Patrick Paul is your franchise left tackle. That's me personally. I don't say it disrespectfully. I'm just saying, I don't know if he's that, if I'm ready to plant my flag and Patrick Paul's my franchise left tackle. But at worst, you bring in a guy like Banks and you play him next to Patrick Paul. If Patrick Paul struggles, you have a good fail-safe that you can slide over. So do that.
Yeah, I just think it's like for our whole division. It's nothing personal to Miami. I think the Jets, last year, we finally seemed to have good offensive line players. The first time we've actually looked at it as a positive, probably in over 15 years, 10 years, 12 years. And, I think Buffalo struggled a little bit. They've used guys that we've thrown out on their line because of injuries. I mean, New England, we know, struggle with their offensive line. I feel like the whole Northeast, our whole conference, our whole division, has struggled with offensive line, and just to stack another guy in there like that, I just wouldn't be surprised if Miami did that. But Miami does like to have very good defensive backs. They like safeties and cornerbacks. It seems like they put a lot of resource into that. So I wouldn't be shocked if they grab Nick, or if they grab Watts, not Watts, Malachi. Like I wouldn't be shocked if Miami went that direction either. But whatever.
All right. So Membou, let's get into Membou, right? Because he's the hot button topic for Jets fans these days. And listen, and I will say he's my number 20 player on the board. My number 1 tackle is number 19. So that just shows you where I'm at with this tackle class.
Right.
And I know that some of these guys are going to go before them. That doesn't, I get it. That's fine. This is just my grades on these guys. And I know Membou's in play at 7 if he's on the board, and would it be my first choice? No. Would I be upset if he was the pick? Also no. Because I think he's really good. excuse me.
And it's a tremendous position of need.
Yeah, 335 pounds, versatile. He checks off all the boxes that you want, right? In terms of arm length, in terms of wingspan. He's a little bit shorter, a little bit more stout. Some think that he's, built like a guard. However, I just think he plays really, really. He's a little bit smaller. It helps him to his advantage because he's already got that natural low center of gravity. He's got a really, really good anchor because of it. And you're talking, obviously, everyone saw him test, man. He is an elite athlete for a guy that size, 6'4" and a half, 330 some odd pounds. Shouldn't move the way he does. Phenomenal range in his ability to reach set points, not only in his pass blocking but in his run blocking. Missouri ran a really, really heavy zone blocking scheme, and he was ideal for it, right? Quick hands, quick feet, turns his feet, does all the things that you want, can get to the second level, can navigates his way through traffic very well, doesn't get picked off. Really, really good play strength. Those strikes of, he dominates people sometimes with the strikes. Super, super aggressive. He super, super aggressive in not only his run blocking, but in his pass sets with the jump set, if you will. Gets people, is not afraid to initiate contact, which is really, really nice. Penalties. The bendy guys gave him some trouble. That's the fact. Footwork can get a little sloppy in his pass sets, or in some of his reach blocks as well, can tend to overset, can get beat like that. I know Nick Skelton from Texas A&M, who's a really, really good edge rusher as well, going to be a top 50 player. He gave him fits. He was the one guy that I thought really this past year really dominated Membu. He was the one guy that just had Membu's number. But that's his play style. He's very, Scarton's very quick. He's got a good first step. He's got an even better inside counter, which tends to give him a little bit of, gave him a little bit of trouble. Sometimes Membu looks like he questions, what he should do. Because sometimes those speed rushers that get by you, the best thing that you can do is just ride him right up the arc. Just take him right out of the play. Let him run, and you stay and you run with him, and you stay the wall between him and the quarterback.
It's so funny that you're saying that. I just have to interrupt you and say that because the other day I was watching Membu. I told you, I texted you that I'm watching Membu right now, and I kept on shaking my head and saying, dude, and I actually said this. You need to walk the arc with him, man. You need to move. You need to walk the arc, dude. You need to walk the arc. It's almost like he's trying too hard. He's like trying to fight him, and the guy's breaking through too soon. It's like, no, walk him around the arc. Like I keep saying it. Like,
so what he does, like I said, because he's very aggressive with a jump set. So he'll try to beat, a guy to the outside and do it in an aggressive fashion instead of just a normal 45 set where you're kind of retreating a little bit. You get your hands in your retreat. He's actually jumping to the mark to kind of to set the tone on the protection or whatnot. And sometimes he gets beat. And what he'll try to do is he'll try to get in front of the guy and re-anchor. He'll try to get in front of the guy and kind of reset and lower his hips and get his hips under him and drive through his hips to just like stop the rush. And it doesn't always work, And sometimes I think when he's trying to do that, just like you said, all you need to do is just use the momentum that the edge rusher's taking. Just let him go, man. Let him go.
Right.
Just run up the arc with him.
Instead of trying to stop and anchor him, just guide him. Just guide him around. And I noticed that. And then I'll tell you what I loved about Membu, though. What I did notice and I loved is and you tell me what you think about this. I noticed that he's better when you run behind him, not away from him. Like, there were times when they lined him up at left tackle and he was just throwing the guy to the left and creating a hole between him and the guard. and he did it like several plays in a row. And I said, my God, I would do that all day with him. He did it better at left tackle. I mean, I didn't see it at right tackle, but I assume he could do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like run right between him and the guard and tell him to push his guy to the outside. And that seemed to me gold for him.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he's powerful. He's low. He's got a low center of gravity. He's strong as an ox. So those type of torque blocks where he can just, use his strength and kind of turn or choose, where to displace the defensive lineman definitely work to his benefit. I actually like him better on the outside stuff. Like I love him out as a lead blocker. I love him in the outside zone stuff. Where he gets hands on guys, he gets up into the second level and gets hands on guys and ends up being the lead blocker. He's really, really beneficial in the screen game. He's so athletic, man. He's so athletic for a big guy like that.
Well, you got to take advantage of that athleticism, right? I mean, what's the point of drafting him and then not letting him get to the second level?
Yeah. He's also I'd like to see him widen his base a little bit more. He plays a little bit narrow. And I don't know if it's like a new age thing, because there's a lot of guys that I have my scouting reports that said the same thing. Not Joe Walt. Will Campbell's another one. Will Campbell looks like his heels are almost together. You know what I mean? And that where it hurts him is, like sometimes these bull rushers, these power rushers in the NFL, your base is too narrow. They're going to go run right through your chest. So yeah, that's Mebo in a nutshell. I think he's really good. He's definitely going to be in play for the Jets at 7. He's another guy. He'll be 20 at the draft. He'll be 20 years old. He won't even be able to have a legal drink after he's selected in the first round. How crazy is that?
Wild. Oh my God, I love the next guy, and nobody expected this. Some people may have figured it out, but nobody. And I would love it if this guy just becomes an all-pro Pro Bowler every year, just so we could tell everybody, Dom C told you so, man. And I watched this film after you told me about him, and it was hard not to fall in love. This guy's amazing.
Yeah, and that's Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon. I just think he's just a really good football player. Like he's as technically sound of a tackle as I've seen. Well, Fashanu was probably a little bit better, more technical. But Connerly, to me, epitomizes what you want in your left tackle, right? That true pass protector, not going to kid, reminds me a lot of, the skill set of a lot of Fashanu's skill set, a lot of DeBrickle Ferguson for the Jets references here. Like that's the type of tackle he is. It's not that he's not strong, but the power profile just isn't really what makes his game, right? What makes his game is those long arms and quick hands. He's able to recover quick. He fights off counters. His initial quickness really gives him the advantage all the time. He recognizes what defensive ends are doing. He recognizes counters and beats them to the punch. And he's long, plus over 34-inch arms really, really helps. The movement skills are good. He's a very, very good athlete. Natural in his movement. His kick step is good. I love him in vertical pass sets. I love him in 45-degree pass sets. He mirrors very well. He looks, again, I think he looks a lot like Olufashinu out there. I think that is a lot of his game reminds me of Fashanu. He definitely needs to bulk up. It's only 315 at 6'5", or just under 6'5". Too many times he got walked back. He walked back in the quarterback. He doesn't have that because he's a little bit underweight. He doesn't have that natural, like that natural leg and hip strength to be able to kind of reset his feet and re-anchor and stop those bull rushes. So he can get walked back or knocked off balance sometimes by true power rushers. You saw it. I mean, we saw it, from this distance, what happened when Mike Green, he got his feet a little too narrow, crossed his feet up, and Mike Green just ran right through his chest at the Senior Bowl. The one rep that everyone wants to talk about, and they didn't talk about the other 30 reps in which he was dominant in the one-on-one drills. So
Right.
why I think I have Connerly ranked number 1 is because I think that he's without a doubt a pure left tackle, right? I think technically he's sound. I think he checks off all the boxes that you want in height, weight, speed, athleticism. Again, another prospect who's just 21 years old, coming into his own, started games early, and was a mainstay on that Oregon line as a sophomore, and then again as a junior in 2024. So he is, I think he's got a 3-sport background too as well. Like, you can tell he moves like a basketball player. You can tell that, his dad was probably his basketball coach and showed him how to shuffle and keep his weight in there, because that's exactly what he looks like in pass protection. He's a perfect blend of Olu Fashanu and Charles Cross from Seattle to me. And I think that's a really good defense. That's a really good offensive tackle. He gets stronger. He really brings more of a power profile into that. Not even so much powerful in his run blocking, but more so powerful as to help reset and re-anchor against power rushers. And I think you're looking at a guy who's got Pro Bowl potential.
So are you? It's funny. I mean, obviously, you're 100% confident he can move over and play right tackle. I mean, is that pretty much a given? If you're a natural left tackle, you could probably.
No, it's not a given. It's not, because you are doing things on the opposite side.
Right.
I think that he's. I think he's a blindside protector, right? We saw Olu move over to the right side, and he wasn't as good as a right tackle as he was as a left tackle, right? Sometimes your movement skills are kind of ingrained. It's muscle memory. You know how to do things one way, and then trying to learn them the other way, it's not the easiest thing. So I think Connerly's probably a better left tackle, and again, for the Jets, it's not a need. So it's Josh Connerly is probably not going to be a guy that's going to be super high up there. However, I know that they did meet with him at the combine. They had a formal meeting with him. I know that they met with him again and worked him out at the pro day. So there's definitely some interest, and that could just be, that could be anything. They just might, they work out tons of guys. Doesn't necessarily mean they're high on their radar or not, but where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Maybe there's a situation where they think that they can take a weapon at 7 and then trade back into the end of round 1 and go get their tackle.
Right.
So.
And, I don't know. I don't trust the mocks. Sometimes Connerly's there. Sometimes he's not.
At 42?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be there. I can't see him getting past Kansas City.
Yeah.
So
they need offensive line. So that's where they're going after the Super Bowl. There's nobody questioning where Kansas City is going in the draft.
I agree.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was their top 2 picks in the second and first round. First round, then second round. I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
So that wraps it up. Yeah, you know what? It's every class is going to have some potential guys that could be really good. Every class is going to, and everything. I think, though, you could see. I mean, I think it's very clear if you were following last year that it's definitely not the same class as last year, but that doesn't mean you can't get a starting tackle, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to end up with a guy or a couple of guys that are Pro Bowlers, right? I mean, you never know. We can only judge what they are coming out. You don't know what's going to happen to these guys. A couple of these guys might develop into freaking stars. You know, that's the hope. That's what you're hoping when you're a team that drafts one of them. Yeah. So we've seen guys come out of the 5th round that become stars and everything.
That's right. That's right.
You should never know.
Yeah. Grandizer, to your question.
Yeah, what question you want to
of my list? Who is the most likely to fall, and if so, how far?
Oh.
So I'd probably say of my list, the guys that are probably most likely to fall, I'd say would be Jonah Savaiinaea or Anthony Belton. And the only reason I would say them is because teams might not see them as tackles, although I see them as tackles. So if they're guards, they could slip into into day 3. I doubt Savania does, and I'd be shocked if Belton did as well. But yeah, that's what I would say if I had to pick anybody on my list that's going to fall. I'd probably say one of those two guys. So
it's hard to imagine the others just because offensive line is just a staple in the draft. Tackles, or it's a staple thing. It's important. There's always teams that need them. They retire faster. They have shorter careers. Guys get hurt. There's always these reasons why you need tackles. And, so it's hard to name, you're talking about the top 6 or 7. It's very hard for any of them to slip unless you were picking a guy nobody had on their radar, which you don't. These are all guys that are known guys that are going to get drafted. So very hard to imagine them slipping. What about this Trey Whittig guy?
Yeah. I know he's from Indiana. I know he's the right tackle. I didn't watch. He's one of the, not one of, but there's a handful of guys that I never got. So I don't have a scouting report. I really can't really offer much on him. I'd be lying or making stuff up if I didn't. And this is not who I am. So I don't really have anything to offer on Whittig. I don't think, maybe he gets drafted, maybe he doesn't, but I don't know. I just didn't do a lot of work on him. So.
And a couple of guys have asked about Crenshaw Dixon, Swamp Ranger before, and now Grandizer.
Yeah. So Crenshaw Dixon is an interesting guy. He's another big guy, another 6'7" tackle, another guy who I think needs some time in the weight room. He also played at San Diego State before transferring down to Florida. A little bit of injury issues early in his career. Super, super long, 35-inch arms. Really, really good wingspan. Knows how to use it as well. Use it to his advantage. Clean, technical tackle. He moves pretty well for a guy that is that big as well. A lot of experience. Lots of games under his belt. He needs some time in the weight room. I just don't know if he's got the functional strength to really play in the NFL right now. Jets fans, I'm not comparing him, I'm not comparing him to this player, but the same kind of mindset with Max Mitchell, right? You took Max Mitchell, and the Jets spent a 3rd round pick or 4th round pick on Max Mitchell.
Yeah.
And you knew that he had the bones, the foundation was there, but he needed some time to get stronger, right? And that's exactly what I think is needed with Crenshaw Dixon. I think he needs a year or two to get in the weight room. The problem is that he's going to be 24 at draft day already. So if it takes him 3 years to get in the league, you're talking about a really, really a lower ceiling of potential on the guy. He also doesn't, he also it's a little bit passive, not very aggressive, which doesn't really bode well for tackles in the NFL. So that's what I'd say about Crenshaw. I got a draftable grade on him. He's a day 3 guy. He's purely, for me, developmental.
Right. So a guy you might take a shot on.
Yeah.
5th, 6th.
Yeah, I mean, he checks off the boxes in what you want in the build, but definitely needs to get stronger. He just doesn't have NFL strength right now.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks, Grandizer. He went through the chat and pulled that out. It wasn't just him. He was pulling out people's questions that we said we'd come back to. So we appreciate that assistance to make sure we answer everyone. Thanks for everyone that stuck with us. Even if you didn't, you watched part of the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being in the chat. Thanks for the ones who weren't in the chat, but just watching. We appreciate it. We're back every week. Next week, I don't know. It'll be something. Maybe guards. I don't know. We'll let you know. We'll let you know. It's good to wonder. I wonder what position they're going to do next, and then after we're done and we talk about all the different positions, we'll move on to just our top list of players and possibilities and things like that, and then we have other potential plans for after the draft as well. So
yes, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, good stuff. Anyway, I'm glad. It seems like our audience is growing a little bit, which is nice to see. Each week, people are getting used to seeing us on Sunday night, so we'll continue with that. and everybody who watches later in the playback. We appreciate the support. If you like the content, if you like the work that Dom C is doing, please show him some love by hitting the like button and going over to Project Prospect and checking out his YouTube channel and giving him a sub. So you could support his content there. And then both of us are on the Talking Jets channel. Most of you know that. So check out our shows there. Dom C is also on Green Bean Jets Fan during the off season, doing drafts and stuff. And I'm there every Sunday with him during Jet games, as most of you know as well. So that's where you can see us. Anything else? Anything else you want to promote that I missed?
No, I'm good, man. I'm good.
Okay. So with that, again, thanks everyone. Thank you, Dom. Another great show. And I'm gonna leave you with something. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it here. Let me see. Whoa. Video file. Okay, I'm gonna leave you guys with this. This is fun. This is fun. My new draft intro. Tom, listen to the words. You'll love it.
A positional group like the tight end group, this is the draft class to do it. It is very deep.
I'm with Green Bean. I mean, to me, the tight ends that you want to have on a team, it's always nice if you can get the guy that does it all.
I think it's going to be a functional part of the offense. So you better get somebody in there that can play, or get a couple guys that do something, extraordinarily well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dom C here with the Talking Jets Network. I'm lucky enough to grab tight end for Georgia Tech, Jackson Hollis. Jackson, how's it feel to be back on the field, my brother?
It's great, man. You know, right when we were getting on that bus, I was just excited.
And that's Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech. Now, he didn't say anything. He continued and did all the drills on an ankle. Another guy with under a 4% drop rate throughout his collegiate career. A positional group like the tight end group, this is the draft class to do it. It is very deep.
Jets chaos will never die, and this I promise you is no lie. His legend will live on, just like the catcher in the rye. His word will be shared in every classroom. Kids will be wearing a Jeremy costume. He has been a Jets fan for over 40 years. So far they have left him drowning in tears. All brakes and no gas. That went as well as looking at Green Bean's ass. Pizza is the weakness from this chaotic storm. That of Frankie, who used to bring the calm, not on Thursdays. That dude named Hennessy to go to hell. Reacting to the games on Green Bean's Jets Fan. Nick Shine and Dano screaming Jeremy is the man. From Jake Asman to Gunny to Jets Talk 24/7. A New York Jets championship will be pure heaven. Deli, cheesesteak, and Southern barbecue. Jeremy and his brothers on Brooklyn Brothers Food Review. You can never get too much of his bald head. You won't forget his name until you're long dead. Jets chaos will never die. It will never die. It won't ever die. It just won't die. Jets cast will never die. It will never die. It won't ever die. It just won't.